gonna call and say you love me?
Yep.
I appreciate
I
that.
am.
Cool.
The president's, I don't have your number.
You don't?
No, I want it. The president's job bill defeated in the Senate, possibly ending its legislative life. Joining us now, a former presidential nominee and Republican senator from Arizona, John McCain. Senator, it's great to see you this morning.
Good morning, Joe.
You were a no. I guess I don't think there was ever a chance of getting 60, and I think even some of the 50, if it wasn't just the motion, those it wouldn't have even totaled 50. So we're where we knew we were going to be after all of this. Sort of almost a campaign tour. But now it's going to come down to brass tacks on what components should actually pass. And what do you think we should actually do right now, or should we do nothing?
Well, I think we should do plenty. There's no doubt that that the country's in very serious problem. Bernanke's cautions about another recession and all that should give us great concern. But let me just say again that we've seen this movie before of the president's proposals: spend, tax, spend, and borrow. And that's not the answer. And I'm sure you recall that they said that if we pass the last stimulus, this is just stimulus 2, that unemployment would be 8% at the maximum, and we know where it is, and we know the economic conditions. So we're coming up with a plan, a Republican plan, that actually is, we think, would help the economy. Deregulatory, lower taxes, fix the tax code, balanced budget amendment, line item veto, immediate offshore drilling. In other words, ways to stimulate the economy to create jobs and bring home, by the way, that $1.4 trillion that's parked overseas because of the high corporate tax rates here, so that they'll invest in American jobs. But so let's hope we can find some common ground. But Joe, there's philosophical differences here. The administration believes that government creates jobs. We believe business creates jobs. And so for us to just pour money, like in the Solyndra thing, into mature technologies and then not be surprised when some of it fails, frankly, is a little bit naive. We need to invest in R&D. We need the R&D tax credit. We need to invest in pure research and then give it over to private businesses and corporations to develop and market it.
We're hearing this a lot. It gets a little bit frustrating too, because both sides are entrenched, and the administration is again going to come back and say, now you just outlined a lot of things, but none of those things were Keynesian. So they're going to come back and say, we've outlined all this other stuff, the payroll tax cuts for businesses, infrastructure bank, all these things that they want. They're going to say, you don't have a plan because your plan doesn't include any of these things that were in the American Jobs Act, and we're going to be back where we were. And Republicans are saying, we do have a plan, but it's lower taxes, less regulation, and we're just not getting anywhere, it doesn't seem like.
Well, I hope we can find some common ground. We look at the president's sinking approval ratings. I'm sure you may have seen yesterday's poll where approval of Congress is down to 13%. I think with a little more effort, we could get into single digits, and we're down to blood relatives and paid staffers. So there's an argument for us to do a better job in the eyes of the American people. But again, Joe, I hate to be repetitive, but we've seen the movie before. To do more of the same, only add in the class warfare routine, isn't what gets it. And by the way, I'm proud, anti-Keynesian. I'm proud of that. Okay.
The payroll stuff is not.
I think we could look at the payroll tax.
Something that's a tax cut. But that's short term, though. I mean, the long term stuff is what the country is craving. I mean, Simpson Bowles or something similar is what the country is craving. Entitlement reform. But I guess my point was, November of 2012 is getting closer and closer, and we keep going back and forth. And we had Gene Sperling on, and we hear him, and then we hear what the Republicans say, and I'm ready to just say, all right, let's just wait till because nobody seems serious. Andrew, you have a question for Senator?
Senator, it's Andrew Sorkin. Real quick, you talked about a repatriation tax holiday, and when you think about jobs, and you also think about all of the cash that companies are already sitting on here in the U.S., over $1 trillion. Why are you convinced that bringing that money back to the U.S. will actually create jobs, given the amount of money that's already here and that doesn't seem to be being spent?
Well, I also believe that if we had a freeze on a moratorium on regulation, if we cleaned up the tax code, cut the corporate tax to 25%, had 3 individual tax brackets, all those other things along with it, we would not just the 1.4 trillion by itself, but if you can bring 1.4 trillion dollars home to the United States of America, I am confident that it would have a beneficial impact on our economy. It has to in some ways. 1.4 trillion. And yeah, one way or another. But again, corporate taxes, as you know very well, Andrew, I read your stuff, that is the highest in the world. And so why not give them a chance to bring it home, but keep it at home if we cut the corporate tax rate to 25% and then cleaned up this tax code so that it's about that thick instead of about that high. That, I think, is one of the areas that we could agree on with the Democrats.
And that's what I was going to ask. Is there any way to marry some of the ideas and things you're talking about with some of the ideas that the president is talking about and actually come up with a bill that everybody can get behind? Is that even on the table? Is that a possibility?
I would hope so, but I'd remind you, when Bill Clinton took a, quote, shellacking back in 1994, his strategy was to sit down with Gingrich and the rest of them and work out welfare reform, path to balanced budget, all of those things, and they worked together and negotiated and came up with results. This president has reacted by going out on the attack, saying pass a bill now that Harry Reid couldn't even bring up. And as you mentioned at the start of the show, we're not even getting a majority of the Senate, even with the Democrats being in a majority to pass. So it's pretty obvious the president is in the campaign mode and feels that the class warfare attack the Republicans in the Harry Truman style is going to be his strategy. So that gives me less optimism. I still am optimistic, though, that the select committee, the super committee, may be able to come up with something which could be helpful. And I hope that we are all aware, and I hear you guys talk about it all the time, danger of another recession. More and more people are saying that that is a real threat. And God knows, in my home state of Arizona, I can't tell you how devastating that would be.
I don't know how much time we have. Sometimes I don't even want to delve into the counterfactual because the 800 billion, we hear that if it wasn't done, we'd be at 15%. So, you know, Zandy and others can make that case that it saved us from a Great Depression. I'm wondering, though, to go back to ask you the counterfactual. If you had been elected, would we be at 9%? Or was the people now talk about the narrative of Rogoff and Reinhardt, that the nature of this most recent financial crisis was so different and so much deeper and so much worse that no one could have really saved us from where we are right now, that it's not the regulations, it's not the tax uncertainty, that it's just the new normal, the way that it is. And so we're going to get into the counterfactual. Do you think that we'd be at 9% if you had been elected, Senator?
No, I'm convinced. I don't believe in the inevitability of anything. And by the way, I think we ought to go back to Zandy and others' predictions that are now saying that the stimulus wasn't big enough, their predictions as to what would happen if we passed the last stimulus. I mean, we're all responsible for what we say. I think if we had tried to get the simplification of the tax code, every business person, I talked to a group of YPOs last night, you know the group, and every one of them said to me, the reason why we're not investing and the reason why we're not creating jobs is because of the total uncertainty out there when the next regulation is coming down, a new requirement under Dodd-Frank, all of the things that make them reluctant to invest and to create jobs. And I think we ought to look back at how we recovered from other serious recessions. And of course, I think this one has been made worse by the fact that businesses and corporations have not been able to have a certain environment. And the second thing is, if I could just mention very quickly, and Andrew, I'm very interested in your opinion on this. I believe it was the housing crisis that triggered this collapse. And we did not do anything about the housing issue. We bailed out Wall Street, we bailed out the banks, we did all that, but we did nothing to help the homeowner. Maricopa County has the highest number of vacant houses of any place in America. Half the homes are underwater. So we helped the financial institutions and Wall Street, and we didn't do anything for Main Street, and that's why I think you're seeing this anger out there being exhibited by these sit-in people.
Right. Senator, I agree with you 100%. The real question then becomes, what can we do for the homeowner? And frankly, politically, in terms of the dynamic in Washington, which party is going to get behind actually doing something for the homeowner without being called socialist, without all of the sort of baggage that came with the 2008 bailout?
It's a complex issue, but I certainly would phase out Fannie and Freddie. I mean, the bank robbers are in charge of the bank here. But the second thing I would do is what I would have done before, and I know it's complex with these derivatives and all the other stuff, but go to the homeowner, say, what level can you afford to pay your mortgage? Buy their mortgage from them, give it back to them at a level that they can pay, and keep people in their homes. Now, I know it's much more complex than that, but it really gets down to keeping homeowners in their homes. And it's terrible what's going on with when we have half the homes in Arizona underwater, and then we expect an economic recovery.
Yeah, Senator, I remember it was about 5 years ago you were on, and I said, you hadn't announced that you were running yet, and I said, you're on Squawk Box, here's your chance to now make some news that you will be running. And you didn't, and I wish you finally did run. And so now I'm going to ask you, are you going to endorse anyone? Why don't do it now? Do it, what do you think? Herman Cain, Romney, what do you think?
Well, I guess it was my failure to announce on that program that accounts for
I wasn't going to, I wasn't going to connect those dots, but I was going to open up the chance for you to do something here.
Could be it. I think it's only appropriate for me to wait for a period of time. I just think that as the former nominee / loser, it's better for me to wait. I'm not saying I would never weigh in, but I don't think now. And
can you give me a top three?
Everybody complains. I think. Look, if you look back at what happened in 2007. It's hard to predict, but I don't think there's any doubt that Mitt Romney is plodding right along and moving along. And by the way, every campaign I've heard, they're not satisfied with the people who are running.
Right.
And I understand that because nobody's perfect, and we examine that candidate and we find out that they're not perfect, and so we go through that. And the media wants a contest, obviously, but I'm confident that our nominee will be victorious November of 2012.
Great. Senator, appreciate your time today. Thank you. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.